Throughout my life, I've learned to deal with problems in my own way. Everybody does, and that's kind of how the world works. When something has you down, whether it be grades, relationships, a tragedy, each person processes and works through their issues in the ways that make the most sense for their unique self. For some, that means eating an entire pint of ice cream in one sitting. For others, that might even entail jumping out of their comfort zone completely and taking back control piece by piece. But for me, as long as I can remember anyway, I escape my problems by playing video games. As is the case for many, games can provide a protected space to zone out, focus in, and create an entirely different reality, one in which all your real-life issues, if only for a few hours, could vanish. I probably don't need to explain video games to you, and people often feel the same way about movies, cooking, road trips, or any number of other escapes. For example, I need to look no further than all the talented humans that pour themselves into music every single day. And about a month ago, my boss suggested that I try my hand at a hobby like singing or playing the guitar, and that maybe doing something like that would take my mind off of things. I considered it for a moment, but then I swiftly remembered the last time I performed in front of an audience and, well, let's roll that tape, please. So, yeah, it's not a surprise that I often found solace in gaming. Ultimately, that was my first and last musical endeavor, and for your sake, that's probably a good thing as well. In any case, it doesn't really matter what that something is exactly, but anything you could do to keep the bad thoughts at bay, whatever they may be, that always how I began and ended my grieving processes. When my grandfather passed away in 2008, I put an unhealthy amount of time into Fallout 3, wandering the gray wasteland, scrub saving in a way that I no longer could in reality. When I had trouble adjusting to college in 2010, I stayed up until 4 a.m. every Friday night for a month with Bobby and Kate, two of the first friends I ever made outside of Maine, until, at long last, we beat Majora's Mask. In 2017, I was laid off from my first ever salaried job, and it kind of felt like the world was ending. In return, I hunkered down and got my first ever platinum trophy on the remastered Ratchet and Clank reboot. The list goes on, obviously, and I'm sure many of you could point to a tough moment that you only navigated because a favorite TV show or album was there to break your fall. Life doesn't always give you a parachute, but in your own way, everybody knows how to mitigate a total crash landing. And, well, not to brag, but I have the receipts too. You can check my old PlayStation 1 memory cards all filled to the brim with 100% plus saves on Crash Bandicoot Warped, or there's the fact that I own Thomas Was Alone on 3 different platforms because its beautiful, simple prose about just wanting to fit in and find your place has always resonated when I was at my absolute lowest. Moreover, you could check my 68 days played on Rocket League servers over the last 4 years. Maybe don't check that last one. I'm not proud of myself, but we all have our vices. So when I went through a life-changing breakup 1 year ago, within a city that I had almost spent a decade of my life with, I responded by launching myself into a new 24-hour plus playthrough of Rogue Legacy. Although addicting in its own right, Rogue Legacy is a game that sticks with me after all these years because it is not an adventure you can ever master, just like life. And I know that sounds insanely cheesy, and it is, but stay with me here. There are tons of games that I can beat in one sitting, like the original Spyro the Dragon trilogy, Ape Escape, Bastion, or Oxenfree, if only thanks to years of muscle memory, knowing where all the hidden secrets are, or how to fly through levels in the simplest, quickest way possible.
And to answer your previous question, Jonas, the thing to do is lay on the beach and drink till you can't remember where you are.
I love all those games and they're near and dear to my heart, but Rogue Legacy tears it all down and forces you to begin over and over and over and over and over. For those that are unfamiliar, Rogue Legacy gives you a vague plotline that involves freeing a castle from an evil ancestor. And each time you die, you have to start back at the beginning of the game, able to slowly upgrade your character, abilities, and overall health based on how far you progressed in your last life. So in the beginning, you kind of get torched and sent back to the start a frustrating amount of times, but as you get comfortable with the controls and mechanics, you progress, get stronger, and eventually conquer your past in a difficult final boss fight. Much like dealing with a problem, life can often follow a similar path. Sometimes you can't get yourself up out of bed. Sometimes you can't cook yourself a real meal. Sometimes you go a few extra days without talking to your parents or friends or those that care about you, afraid about being such a bummer that you'll ruin everybody else's time. Surely enough, you rediscover that strength and motivation, unlock a few truths that were buried inside of you, and try to take baby steps toward finding yourself again. It's not a perfect analogy, mind you, but in a way it's why I've always loved Rogue Legacy. To get to your finish line, whatever it is, it's not going to be a straightforward race, and you're going to have to start over constantly, even if you don't want to. You died, but you tried your best. It wasn't enough this time, so get up and try again. Rinse, repeat, and use the lessons you just learned to be a tiny bit better than you were the last time around. It may seem like an insurmountable task, but you'll get there, one day or life at a time. Once I beat Rogue Legacy again, Dead Cells, another incredible roguelite, got its Metroidvania claws firmly under my skin in early August. After 36 hours spent playing it between 3 different cities, I finally finished the game. But when I exhaled and cleared my eyes, I realized that I had actually moved 3,000 miles away from Boston to Seattle. And most importantly, I realized that I was probably going to be okay too. But last month, when I was going through the old emotional ringer once again, I turned to my pal Video Games. This time, however, they didn't answer my call. Everything, and I mean everything, served only as a reminder of my discomfort, regrets, and struggle, ultimately too my inability to shut off that always turning part of my mind.
This is my storm! I caused this! I caused all of this! I changed fate and destiny so much that I actually did alter the course of everything!
Typically, physical locations, foods, memories, or triggers can be tough enough for anybody to swallow. In fact, I had to briskly walk out of a local Goodwill just to stop myself from hyperventilating a few weeks ago, for example. But games, locked into their own worlds with their own rules, maps, and difficulties, had often lent themselves to me as a giant brick wall of defense. In the past, as I listened to Rux calmly lead the kid through the Calamity and Bastion for the 5th time through, I slowly became calmer and less angry at myself too. And as I looked for my place in the grand scheme of things, both big and small, Alan Watts' brilliant lectures and everything dragged me ever so closer to my own discoveries.
On the other hand, when you forget about breathing altogether, it still goes on. And so it seems to be something that happens to you. Which is it? What enables you to make a decision? When you decide, do you first decide to decide? Or do you just decide? Now, how do you do that? Nobody knows, you see?
Whereas the unnamed boy who courageously navigated the 5 stages of grief in RiME, I pushed myself ever so subtly towards that same type of acceptance. But over the last 30 or so days, however, my classic coping mechanisms didn't quite have my back, and it crushed me because, worse, I had no idea why. The number of times I loaded up a game on my Xbox only to quit out after 3 minutes or before the main menu had even loaded was both fast and furious. Even Rocket League could not hold me as I consistently rage quit, only to retreat to the softer confines of my bed and stare at the ceiling instead. The Crash Team Racing remaster, a game I had dreamed about playing for over a decade, barely managed to measure a blip on the Benny Game Wave 5000. Focusing on that perfect crystal path or fruitlessly attempting to find a near-flawless run in order to beat Oxide often only reminded myself of my own personal failures when I came up short in the game. So when I complained about all this to a buddy of mine, he suggested that the CTRs and Rocket Leagues of the world, your infinitely endless multiplayer experiences, wouldn't help to serve as an adequate backdrop for my pain, and certainly not as well as an immersive single-player campaign might. So I tried picking Shadow of the Tomb Raider up again, but every time my well-thought-out plans ended in another death to Lara Croft, I only thought, well, if you had done something else, things could have been different. Suddenly, my most reliable way to deal with emotional trauma was erased, and that left me with little motivation to get out of bed between the hours of 6 p.m. and 9 a.m. sometimes. I felt useless and trapped beneath a self-inflicted landslide. This time, however, Elizabeth wasn't coming to baptize me in the holy waters of Columbia. This time, I was all on my own. Obviously, and this goes without saying, depression and anxiety strike people in a million different ways, and I know it's always had this strange grip on me. Nothing monumentally crushing, never forever, always kind of passing through, but then I never truly fulfilled it or addressed it either, and for a long time I believed that diving into a game could save me at that moment, or at the very least that the longer I was submerged in something else entirely, the better the odds were that the issue would resolve itself as my self-conscious did the heavy lifting without me ever truly facing the issues head on. And as they say, time heals all wounds, right? Maybe the point of this is that there's no point at all, or even further, the point might be that for once I know it's okay to feel bad and lost or empty without also ignoring those impulses either. I know that it's okay to process your issues front and center no matter how long it may take you to do so, or that it's okay not to have the passion to finally finish Breath of the Wild. Seriously, Ben, as a reminder, you are the only person on this planet that hasn't yet. And it's okay to give up on Horizon Zero Dawn because the map gives your game OCD an unbeatable hurdle to clear. And all jokes aside, basically, I think I've learned that it's okay not to be okay. Or most importantly, that it's okay to grow and find new ways to protect yourself. This time around, that meant creating a 17-hour Spotify playlist. It meant switching rooms in my house to get a new perspective and an entire floor away from a space that no longer felt like my own. It meant going on early morning walks without a destination, and in a way it meant making this video. Putting my energy into something more useful, more tangible, more cathartic. No matter if nobody even ever sees this video at all, it has helped me in some small way. But at the same time, there's nothing quite like a game narrative that you can sink your teeth into. When you're confused about your own direction, a game can offer emotional resonance, relatable themes, and all the tools you need to solve the problem or challenge at hand. In a really simplistic way, games help in the grieving process because they present a problem and the tools to solve them with a beginning, middle, and end, one that often wraps up with a satisfying and optimistic conclusion, and unfortunately life so rarely works like that in the real world, so entering a universe where those rules made sense has always helped me process my issues in a far more digestible way. But you have to do what you can to just convince yourself that this moment, second, instance, whatever it is not the new normal. That feeling this bad or this ugly or this scene is just a blip on the radar if you're willing to be brave and strong in ways that you didn't think you had inside you before. And hiding myself away was always the first thing I did after something difficult went down, pretending that I was fine while I focused in on trying to make somebody like Mae Borowski or Max Caulfield happier instead. But maybe that's not my way forward anymore. Maybe I need to face my struggles head on. Or if I can't beat them, I don't have to pretend that I can, or did, or will. Not now, anyways. Over the last month, I've tried to be more honest with myself, too. Problems don't tend to subside just because you've made changes or taken big leaps. Maybe they're silenced for the time being. But life will throw you a curveball before long, and that's just how things work, and that's how they always will. And if that all seems a little helpless, it doesn't have to be, because you can identify small steps that'll push you toward success, and then Focus in on doing them instead of dwelling on the things you wish you could change or rewrite or start over on. It's not easy to confront your insecurities, and it's certainly not simple to rise above them either. And those two ideas can exist at the same time, and I truly don't know if I ever accepted that in-between reality until just now. I think for a long time I've already known that too. I know that I need to use my own words, however jumbled they may be, instead of using others. When your usual trusted methods of escapism suddenly turn against you, nipping at your heels with every errant thought, you might find your answer, or at least the beginning of an important breakthrough, right where you least expected it. For me, today, the only answer I possess is that I don't have an answer for how I'm feeling right now, but I don't think I'm going to run from it anymore. I'm not okay, but that's okay too. Eventually, I will be, because I have to be, but that time isn't coming right now, and I'm not going to find any salvation or peace in the wasteland, ocean, or even, if by some strange miracle, by reaching Grand Champion. At some nondescript, unknown point in time, I will find the answers I need to hear. They might be hidden and buried deep inside of me right now, but no shortcut or marathon gaming session is going to get me there any faster. And for the first time that I can remember, I am finally okay with that.